Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you are. And welcome to another Whiskey Festival in a Box 3.0 tasting session. And this is the Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength batch 14. Wow, it's a long title. And we are, I'm delighted to say, we're joined by David Miles from Edrington UK, who's been a friend of ours for some time. I'm going to bring him in just now. Good afternoon, David. How are you?
Eddie, good afternoon to you. I am very well, thank you. I am here in not very sunny and not particularly warm London, but everything is good. Lovely to see you.
You look very COVID secure there. That's all good.
Got masks dangling around left, right, and centre here.
Yeah, well, possibly Laphroaig is the ultimate COVID killer, I would think. It certainly takes no prisoners from a palate point of view. But we are here to talk about that. But just before we do, David, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to the viewers at home, so they get an idea of who you are and what you do.
Certainly. So I am David Miles. I work with Edrington UK. In fact, my job title has just changed, and my sort of job responsibilities have just changed a little bit recently, Eddie. So I am now becoming a whiskey brands ambassador rather than a whiskey specialist. All this really means is that I'm sort of becoming the brand's ambassador for the Edrington UK brands that don't have a standalone brands ambassador. So in particular, one of those brands is Laphroaig. So I'm going to be doing a little more work representing Laphroaig around the country and doing trainings on Laphroaig. My job does involve most of the other brands in the portfolio, which is why it is so much fun. Basically, I am talking about Laphroaig one day and Bowmore the next, small batch bourbons the day after that, Courvoisier cognac, and then back to where we started. So it's always different, it's always fun, and yeah, I'm genuinely one of the lucky people who get up in the morning and love what it is that they do.
Well, I think you're amongst good company, because I think everyone I've spoken to is of the same opinion that their job is the best. I can't think of many other industries I'd like to work in. Anyway, you've kindly supplied the latest batch of Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength, which is always very exciting, because I must admit I've long been a fan of 10-year-old cask strength. I think it's one of the best Laphroaig bottlings that certainly you used to be able to get it very consistently, and then you guys took it away from us. You took it to the distillery and wouldn't let us buy it unless we were at the distillery, which was a bit irritating. But now you've brought it back into the fold of the UK retail market, which is great news for us Laphroaig lovers. So why don't we pour ourselves a little bit, and then you can tell us more about it.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, first thing I think we need to establish here is that we heard you were getting a little irritated at the lack of availability, so we just turned tail and ran, Eddie. We wouldn't dare do something that would irritate you. So hopefully we're back in your good books now. But I do agree with you on this in so many ways that if you love Laphroaig, and there are so many of us out there who do really love this liquid, then the cask strength is the absolute epitome of what Laphroaig is. This is, without actually being at the distillery and drawing it from the cask yourself, and let's face it, none of us are really going to have that opportunity at the moment. And this is as close to that experience as you're going to get. So, if you want to know what Laphroaig is, this is it. So this is a lovely way to spend a few minutes in the afternoon. It really is. So I think you mentioned it already. This is batch 14. So we are putting a batch out pretty much every 6 months, maybe now. So the cask strengths are coming out on a fairly regular basis. Like you say, 58.6% ABV. I've got another couple of bottlings around me. So in fact, batch 12 was at 60.1%. Batch 11 was also at 58.6% ABV. So again, this is the fun of the cask strength, isn't it? You get these little variations there.
Yes, yes. Okay, so David, in terms of the flavors that we are going to expect in this particular batch, obviously Laphroaig is Laphroaig. It's big, it's meaty and smoky, and it's always going to be that way. But is there anything in the batch 14 that you've picked out yourself which you think is particularly individual to it?
Well, the honest truth here, Eddie, is that quite often in this sort of scenario is where I would have cheated beforehand. And I'll have got in touch with John Campbell at the distillery to say, John, need a bit of help. But as I'm guessing, one of the things we might be just chatting about later is obviously that's not an option at the moment. So, but on the
first of all, it seems very dark in color. Is this like a first fill bourbon, or maybe sherry even?
I would imagine the 10 tends to be. It's all about the bourbon barrel.
Yeah.
So if there is a darkness in color, then maybe there's a little extra first fill cask gone into this. That I certainly wouldn't rule out. Just nosing it, I'm thinking I'm getting a little extra sweetness than I've got on some of the other.
Yeah, definitely.
Which again would maybe indicate a little more American oak presence, a little more of that first fill influence on the.
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of stewed fruit.
Yeah,
almost like a apple strudel or something. That kind of really.
Yeah.
Still quite acidic, but very stewed.
Again, that sort of that wintertime, slightly Christmassy.
It's really lovely, actually. Not that I'm surprised, but
no. And this is one of the joys of this too. Is it's cask strength, but it has a freshness to it just on the nose. So it sounds ridiculous to talk about a lightness when we're talking about something at over 58% ABV, but I'm not bracing myself for this. I'm thinking this is just gonna be a joy when it hits my lips. So I think I better let it hit my lips.
Yeah, I think we'll do that. Wow. Yeah, it's a big, juicy fruit smoke bomb mouth.
It really is. That's that is a whiskey to chew over on your palate there, isn't it? That has got much more wood, much more kind of a bit more spice influence than I was expecting from the nose there. Let's construct a little theory here. That does feel like it's got more wood influence. You've already mentioned possibly the color there. There's a gorgeous, that deeper, not even ginger, kind of like a darker clove spice note underlying everything here.
Yes, it's definitely like a winter Laphroaig, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're definitely tasting in the right season, I feel.
Yep. Yeah, if you're having this by an open fire, this is going to be a big competition with the smoke from the fire as to which has got the most influence on your room.
Yeah. I'm getting like aniseed or, sort of really dark licorice just from adding a little bit of water to it. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it because I think it can take it.
It's a weird because, usually the Laphroaig cask strength, the recommendation on the bottles is usually, I haven't even looked at the back of this one, but they do say, add water, maybe twice as much water as whiskey, which I think is overdoing it as a general rule.
Twice as much, did you say?
Yeah. I can pick up one of the older ones here just to. Yes, certainly my batch 11 says we recommend that you add twice as much water as whiskey to fully appreciate. Now, who am I to argue with the team at Laphroaig? But no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, I mean, I've added it's probably now 50-50.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the classic sort of creosote,
Yeah.
really, coal shed and the fresh tar melting by the roadside.
I'm a few drops behind you. I'm getting that first little splash. It's almost like the resin, the piney notes. Oh boy, yeah. No, you said tar, and that's absolutely now. Give it a little.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty profound.
I feel like I've got TB in the 1930s, and my mum sent me out to where they're laying the tarmac for a new road and told me to breathe in. It's
yeah, exactly. Oh dear. Anyway, listen, David, while we're enjoying that, and hopefully the folks at home are enjoying it too, why don't you give us a little potted history of Laphroaig? Because obviously there will be some people who've heard it before, but there's equally some who haven't. And it's a fascinating story regardless, being one of the older distilleries in Scotland. So why don't you just, if you can, give us a kind of in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, it's Laphroaig, we have been around for a while. The bottle says that we're established in 1815, as with, let's face it, basically with any distillery that describes themselves as being established on a certain date. We were busted by customs and excise in 1815. We've been paying tax since 1815, doing the paperwork since then. But we have been around for a while, and because we are an Islay distillery, because we are right on the coast there. Again, those of you who might not know, but Laphroaig actually translates from the Gaelic as the beautiful hollow by the broad bay, and this allocation is so influential on the whiskey. We've always been a peated whiskey. Historically, getting coal over Islay would always have been a struggle. Hence the reason so many Islay whiskies are peated and remain peated. This is the character. This is what makes us where we are. All the peat we use at Laphroaig is Islay peat, and this is such a big contributor to the Laphroaig character. Everything you get with those sort of medicinal notes, the TCP characteristics, the brininess, this can all be traced back to that peat influence, that Islay peat influence. If you go to Islay, next time we all get the chance to visit Islay, let's hope it's not too far away, look around you. There are not that many trees on Islay. And what this means is that the peat, which is just the crushed up, rotted down vegetation from the last few thousand years, what makes the peat is dependent on the vegetation that is growing around there. Islay peat is very much heather and a lot of seaweed, basically. And this means that when you burn it, you get very different aromas and flavors being released there in the smoke compared to a mainland peat, where, if you think back to Scotland a few thousand years ago, basically it was covered by the Caledonian forest. So mainland Scotland, the peat is going to be much woodier. It's still going to give great flavors and aromas, but it's going to be slightly more generic. It's going to be slightly woodier. Islay peat has got this distinctive maritime medicinal note to it, and that is what is so much part of the character of the whiskey in the end.
Well, I was just going to jump in there and just to reinforce your message, if anyone wants to try it, taste the Highland Park and the Laphroaig side by side. I mean, the Laphroaig is much more heavily peated, but the different style of peat is quite on show, should we say? Because obviously Highland Park's peat is that kind of more heathery, floral, earthy peat, whereas like you say, Laphroaig is much more on the seaweed style of peat.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking, I think there's sometimes a tendency, Eddie, to overplay the idea of location. We're not wine, we're not talking about terroir here, but at the same time, this is a great example of how your environment and where your ingredients come from and where the whiskey is matured does make a huge impact on the flavour of the finished whiskey. And Laphroaig's insistence on using just this Isla peat, this is a big part of our character, undoubtedly. Now, part of what the distillery does is almost designed to then play up that influence. Obviously we're not the only distillery on Isla that uses Isla peat, but we do seem to go to certain lengths to really concentrate that influence. So when we are peating the barley, we try to burn the peat at as low a temperature as possible. Now, we talk about cold smoking. If there's a flame that starts to appear in the kiln at Laphroaig, it gets battered out. We don't want that. We want the smoke to be as chilled as possible. So we are not toasting, we're not heating the barley in any way. Quite often when we talk about the whiskey making process, we do talk about the peat smoke as being part of the drying influence on the barley in the whole malting process. And the truth is that we talk about this because it simplifies the process. It helps to clarify the differences in production between peated and unpeated whiskies. But actually, in particular for Laphroaig, we are not looking to dry the barley with our peat smoke. We are just looking to impregnate every grain of barley with the smoke, and we will then pump warm air through the barley to dry it out as a separate later stage of the process. But this desire to use this cold smoking helps to concentrate the peat smoke, helps to concentrate that flavor that we're looking for here. When we are distilling, one of the things that we can do to play around with the flavor of the new make spirit that we're going to pull out, at Laphroaig, we take a very late cut on the second distillation. And the reason for this is that the smokiness, those phenols in the new make spirit tend to come through much later in the distillation run. So were we to take the cut where, in the middle, as it were, we would actually miss a lot of that smoke quality that we're looking for. By taking a much later cut, this gives us a concentration of the smoke in Laphroaig. So here's another way that we help to create a very distinctive character, although we are using a lot of the same basic raw materials as a lot of other distilleries. It's little things like this that help to give us our individuality. Famously, we've got the 7 stills. We've got 3 wash stills, all the same shape and size, 3 spirit stills, all the same shape and size, and then still number 7, that 4th spirit still, a different shape and size. And every batch of new make spirit always has some distillate from the 4th still mixed in. It gives us part of the quality. It gives us the character that is Laphroaig.
Well, it's all these little things that go to contribute to the individuality, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think that's the wonderful thing about single malt distilling as opposed to certain other spirits, white spirits particularly, which simply don't necessarily have that diversity of production difference. So it's great. It's great to hear. I mean, that cold smoking idea is quite fascinating. So,
Yeah.
which is obviously kind of breaking from tradition, because peat smoke historically would have been used to dry,
Yes.
whereas you're almost using it more as the flavor provider,
Yeah.
which I suppose means you can expose the barley to the peat smoke for a longer period to maximize that phenolic absorption.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's they're little steps. It's incremental, but every one just helps to build and build and builds. The character that we end up with. You've been in the warehouses at
Yeah.
Laphroaig, and you know we do have sherry casks maturing there, and just last year we put out, earlier this year, a 10-year-old sherry cask finish.
Yep.
First time we've done that for a long time.
Mhm.
But we are predominantly about the bourbon barrels.
Yes.
And within that, we have a very strong relationship with Maker's Mark. Most of the bourbon barrels are old Maker's ones. Yes, there are barrels from Heaven Hill and from Beam in the warehouses. It's not an exclusive thing here, but a long relationship now with Maker's Mark. Now, Maker's Mark make great bourbon. Maker's Mark are so stringent on the requirements for the barrels that they want to use for their maturation. And when we, inherit those casks, as it were, we know we're getting great quality casks, and we know as well that Maker's Mark is always matured for around 6.5 years. So it's got that little extra time spent maturing in Kentucky. On the one side, you know what? That means that the Maker's Mark maybe has pulled out a bit more of the flavour colour from the wood. We're going to have to work a bit harder. We're going to have to wait a bit longer to get flavour and colour from those barrels when they come to us. But the other side of that is that means there's been that extra time where the Maker's Mark has been in the wood, has been soaked into it, but is reacting with the wood, is actually helping to create different flavors there. It's something I always say about Laphroaig, and as valid with the cask strength as with any other expression, it's get beyond the smoke. What else is there? Because it is about the smoke. But if it was just about the smoke, all we would have here is peaty moonshine. And it's not that. This is not, even at cask strength, it's a big beast, but it's not rough. This is not a throat stripper. This is a powerful, sure, but it's a complex whiskey, and it deserves time, and it deserves you taking a few moments, getting your nose right into the glass, because there is so much going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, as we were discussing earlier, you've had a bit of personnel change at the distillery with John Campbell, who was distillery manager for a long time, having left this year. So what's next for Laphroaig? I mean, obviously, the 10-year-old kind of trundles on, and it's the flagship, and we saw 10-year-old sherry cask finish, as you say, which was fabulous. The cask strength 10-year-old, which kind of comes in small batches. Is there anything else coming that we should know about?
We are going. So we're going through the Ian Hunter range. So there's been a couple of expressions there. I believe we've got one more Ian Hunter expression to come out, which will be happening earlier next year. Now, the honest truth is, at the moment, I don't know what the next new expression will be, but I'm fairly certain at the distillery we will keep on coming up with innovations, and there will be a new expression or two coming out. I believe that the triple wood is going to fade into the background. So if you don't have a bottle on your shelf, this might be the moment to make sure you've got stocks of that. But that is just going to open up a bit of space for another expression to come through. It will be the first one that John Campbell hasn't been responsible for in many ways, but he'll have laid down the stocks for it. He'll have been doing the groundwork there, and John was there for 26 years, something like that. That's a hell of a run as a distillery manager. And you look at the whiskey that's coming out now, he's created some quite glorious whiskies. But he's working with a really good team too. And, we know that the quality of the liquid is there. It's there. John would be the first to say this, he needs a team. There is a team working there at the distillery. Let's never overlook the role of Ron Welsh as the actual whiskey maker. He is the guy who is actually marrying casks together. He's still there. The Laphroaig whiskies, Eddie, I wish I could be more specific with you here and say, yeah, we've got this happening. But like I said,
that's okay.
I don't know. But I'm also be fairly certain that whatever it is going to be pretty damn special.
Yeah. Well, very rarely is there a disappointing Laphroaig release. Right. So, slightly off the beat question for you, taking your Laphroaig hat off.
Right.
Outside of whiskey, maybe, what other tipples would you be enjoying over Christmas and beyond? Is there something that you kind of turn to apart from Laphroaig or whiskey?
Every now and then, I do try. I try some other things just to remind me why I love whiskey so much. But having said that, you know what? There's so much great stuff out there. I am a huge fan of a really dry sherry, Fino Manzaniers. That is and even, I usually sort of think about that as, hot, crisp summer evening sitting outside, but actually, any time of the year, really chilled. It's just such a glorious way to start the evening. I'm a big fan of cocktails. I really am. There are so many ways to get pleasure from drinking that is not just sipping whiskey on its own. I'm a big fan of that, as you well know. So don't get me wrong here, but I think one of the most underrated of all classic cocktails is the sidecar. And again, it's a kind of Christmas drink. So equal parts of cognac, Cointreau, lemon juice, shake well, serve up. It's a glorious drink. Do use a good quality, use a VSOP cognac for it. For me, it's the best of those up cocktails in the sour family. I prefer it to a white lady. I prefer it to a margarita. It's the flavor of the cognac is something that really comes through in a cocktail like that.
Interesting. Actually, I was on with one of your colleagues for the Highland Park session, and Teddy was recommending a Negroni made with white tequila or tequila blanco, which sounds fascinating as well.
Right, yeah, it does, doesn't it? And you know what? There I am, having just said, I'm a big fan of cocktails, and there's something that I've never tried.
No, I've never. I've had plenty of Negronis, but never with.
And I'm very happy with the Boulevardier when you switch the gin out and put bourbon in, but switching the gin out, putting in a Blanco or a Plata tequila, There's something to think about.
You may have started a new movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just because I've got it here, and I may as well just do an outrageous plug, but it's for a good cause. So when I do want a lager, a cold, crisp lager, but Cold Town Beer is the Scottish brewery, but they created this beer, and all of the profits are going to the BEN, so to the Benevolent Fund for the on-trade.
Yeah.
Which, given the year or so that the on-trade is having, and given what it looks like it's going to be happening for the next couple of months, I hope you will forgive me for that unashamed plug.
No, not at all. Not at all. Totally with you on that. Anyway, listen, David, it's been a pleasure as always to catch up with you. Hopefully, and I'm sure I said this last time, but hopefully next time we see each other, it will be over a table rather than through a computer screen.
I am so looking forward to that happening, Eddie. And once again, I think that's what I said last time we did this. But yeah, at the Whiskey Lounge in front of an audience of real people is going to be such a thrill. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, in the meantime, my friend, I wish you Slanjavar and have a great Christmas and New Year. And everyone at home, I hope you're enjoying this session and all of the sessions, and take care, everyone.
Likewise. Merry Christmas to you, Eddie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, David. Cheers.